Attention, armchair quarterbacks and shower thought GMs. It's time for this week's episode of SportsBall with Mike Maharrey and Alan Mosley.
I've upgraded SportsBall on the injury report from questionable to maybe.
Game time decision.
Well, boy, we've really pushed that to the limit this week.
Indeed. We're at least out there in warm-ups.
Yeah. Have you noticed it seems it's become more common for players that you know they're not playing, but they're out there like with their helmet and stuff? I always thought the rule was like if you knew a guy couldn't go in, you took his helmet, right?
Yeah.
Because that's
kind
of
they
like,
are doing.
Yeah. So that's Bryce Young last week for Alabama was like a scratch.
Yeah.
He was not starting and he was on the field with his helmet.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Anyway, guys, welcome back for another episode of Sports Ball. I am your host, Alan Mosley, joined as always by Tampa Bay sports superfan Mike Maharrey. Mike, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
I'm doing okay. Actually, had a little bit of a harder time this week getting segments like Announces Say together because the intellectual property bots are out in force shutting down all the clips.
Oh, boy.
So NFL and others, shame on you. But never fear, folks. The announcers say so much they can't cover it all up.
Can't get all of it.
Constantly spanking him.
Those two guys are almost like they're inside each other's bodies sometimes.
Constantly spanking him.
Here it is. I'm coming. Oh!
Constantly spanking him.
Oh! Hey, when you witness a facial, you just can't help yourself.
Constantly spanking him.
In the UK, and even Aaron Rodgers, doppelganger is on hand.
What the?
Not Aaron Rodgers? Aaron Rodgers, or is it the reverse?
Where am I? Is it Bizarro, Aaron Rodgers? What are you doing here?
Constantly spanking him.
Oh, you fat with a 3. Yes, I just said that. That is that man's name. Don't tweet at me. I don't want a tweet from anybody. That's the man's name.
Constantly spanking him.
Open your mouth wide and take it.
Look at Curry. So inspirational, man.
What does second cousins mean?
Blondes have more fun.
When emotionally, you're like, I'm going to come, and it ain't there. You're trying to, oh yeah, let's go, and it's not there. Constantly spanking him.
Under 10 seconds on that play card. Under 10 seconds on that play card.
Constantly spanking him.
There's a certain theme to this segment every single week. Have you noticed?
I noticed that.
All right.
I enjoy the fact that you put some NASCAR in there.
I know we did have some NASCAR in there. I wish it was under better pretenses than a guy heading towards the wall, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, nobody cares about NASCAR anymore. But you know what people do care about?
What's that?
The National Hockey League.
Ooh,
yeah, we got started this week with the Tampa Bay Lightning. Actually, we got started over the weekend. They had a couple of games over in Europe, but those don't count really. So like the big rollout of the season was on Tuesday. We had the Lightning and the Rangers. Lightning look like crap. I've already predicted they'll not make the playoffs this year because, you know, that's what I do.
Mm-hmm.
But you want to know what I think about the hockey season?
What's that?
I think we're going to have a season of more parity in the NHL. And it's interesting. If you go back and look at the Eastern Conference standings last year in particular, the top 4 teams in each division all had over 100 points. So all of the playoff teams had over 100 points. And then it dropped down to 84 points for the first team out of the playoffs. So huge kind of disparity between the top 8 and the rest of the conference. Western Conference a little tighter for the final playoff spot, but there was still this big drop off to the bottom tier teams. I don't think you're going to see that this year. And the reason being is there was a lot of moves in the offseason. And you know why?
Why is that?
Salary cap.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. So with the salary cap moves, a lot of the bottom teams got a lot better and kind of weakened some of the top teams. So the cap, unlike football, which still managed to go up after the pandemic, the salary cap for the NHL has been actually exactly the same the past 2 seasons. And then this year it went up just $1 million. So you're basically in your 3rd year of players coming up for contracts that obviously are wanting more money. They're wanting their raises, and there's no salary cap room. So, got a lot of teams that are kind of trying to juggle with the cap ramifications. So you take like the Tampa Bay Lightning. Their core is still intact. You've still got your Hedman and your Stamkos and your Vasilevsky, but they lost their best defenseman in Ryan McDonough. He's in Nashville now. And then and Andre Palat, who was one of their top line forwards and actually one of their best playoff scorers. He's in New Jersey. The Panthers lost Jonathan Huberdeau, who was their top forward in points last year. He's in Calgary now, who, by the way, is probably going to challenge the Avs this year. But the Avs, they lost Ali Kadri, who scored 28 goals, had 59 assists last year. He's now over in Calgary. So, you see a lot of these top teams, they're not a lot worse, but you pull a couple good players off and you kind of bring them down to earth. Then you've got other teams like the Ottawa Senators, who were god-awful last year, but they picked up some firepower, including Alex DeBrincat and Claude Giroux. I know a lot of these names mean nothing to you, but anybody who follows hockey is going to be like, oh, okay. And they also potentially fixed their goaltending problems with the acquisition of Cam Talbot. So the Sens are going to be better. They might not be a playoff contender, but they're not going to lose 42 games this year either. So you're going to see those point totals at the top drop off, and I think it's going to make it a lot more competitive for those top playoff spots. So kind of looking ahead, I think a lot of the usual suspects are still going to vie for the Cup this year. In the East, you got the Panthers, the Rangers, the Hurricanes, and the Leafs. I think any of those four teams could potentially make it to the finals. The Lightning may still be in the mix. And then you can't count out Boston, maybe the Caps, the Pens. And it wouldn't shock me if you saw one of these other teams like maybe the Islanders or the Detroit Red Wings. They're going to be a lot better on those teams that kind of sneaks into the picture. And then out in the West, you've got the Avs. The Flames, as I mentioned, are going to be a lot better. The Oilers, the Vegas Knights, who dealt with a lot of injuries last year. But then you also got the Wild and the Kings, and somebody like Nashville, Dallas, St. Louis could all pop into the mix. So the bottom line is we're going to have a lot of parity, and it's really hard to predict who is going to be in the finals this year when you kind of boil it all down. So it should be interesting. If you like parity, I think it'll be an interesting season. If you're wanting your team to stay good like me, it's a little bit distressing. But while we're on the subject, before we move on of the NHL, I've got to bitch about the superimposed ads that ESPN is putting on the boards.
Yep.
Yeah, so they're basically using the boards as a whiteboard. Now, first off, it looks every bit like what it is, which is CGI.
Yeah.
And so it creates this weird video game feeling. You got real players, but then you've got this video game background, which just kind of sucks. But on top of that, these ads are constantly changing and moving, right? It's super distracting. Like hockey's not a game that translates very well to TV.
Yeah.
The diameter of the puck is 3 inches, so it's hard to see the little bitch anyway. The last thing you need, right, is video game lights flashing. Like, I get it. It's always about the revenue, and this is a way they can put all these different ads on. But geez Louise, make it stop, please.
Leave it up to a goalie to talk about how hard it is to see the little bitch talking about the puck. Let me ask you this, Mike Maharrey. I know we're only 2-3 games into the hockey regular season, but hockey preseason, which is a thing that does exist, I mean, it's over in the blink of an eye. And we've seen this phenomenon in the NFL where the preseason has shrunk, the regular season has grown, but one of the byproducts is we're 5 games into the NFL season, and you still have announcers, coaches, players complaining that they're just not in rhythm yet and they're not playing their best football yet. And they're 5 games into the season. Is that something you see in hockey as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when you see the kind of turnover that we saw in the last offseason. You've got new guys on every team. And preseason in the NHL is very much about tryouts. So a lot of those preseason games, you won't see your starting lineups until you get down to maybe the last game. And even then you may still have a couple of players that they're kind of shuffling in, trying to figure out who's going to slot into those last lines. And so, yeah, you really don't have a sense of what the team is going to be until you get into that first game. So I watched the Lightning and the Rangers, and both teams were a little bit, just kind of little mistakes, not crisp. And where you really saw it, especially for the Lightning, was on special teams. your power plays, your penalty kills, because again, you're slotting new guys into these positions. There's a chemistry of knowing where people are going to be on the ice and how people respond to certain situations. So, yeah, the NHL definitely has that kind of sloppiness that you often see. But then again, I watched the Avs last night playing Chicago, and the Avs looked like the Avs did last year. So,
yeah.
you know.
Well, on that note, Mike, I've literally never worn a pair of skates in my life, so I don't think I would be much use to you on the ice. However, I can tell you what I would be good at in this week's segment of I can do that. Davante Adams slamming his helmet after the Raiders lose to the Chiefs, but oh no, he shoves down the independent contractor photography guy working for ESPN as he storms off the field. Meharry losing to the Chiefs in Arrowhead and then throwing a temper tantrum. I can do that. Sign me up.
Wow. I think that's probably not going to end well for Davante.
No, he's going to be getting a call from the NFL. Also, by the way, I know it's your segment, but you can fire a bonus punk to the head of Davante Adams, who rushed out an apology because he knew he was in trouble, but it was your classic non-apology of "I'm sorry you were in my way."
Right.
That's not an apology. Anyway, I'm sorry. That's not even in our notes. I just had to get that out there. On the one hand, I don't think he should be arrested because he flew off the handle one time.
Right.
On the other hand, that's not an apology, so I kind of hope he gets stung a little bit.
Yeah.
With that said, I do want to talk about a cowardly coach coaching cowardly. Look away, Steelers fans, because Mike Tomlin was absolutely abysmal this past week. The Steelers got blown out by the Bills, and that may have been what ultimately was going to happen no matter what Mike Tomlin did. But he elected to try a field goal on 4th and 5 from the Buffalo 15-yard line.
Oh, no.
Trailing 24-3.
Oh, no.
At the end of the first half. They were currently on a 9-play, 60-yard drive up to that point, which is about all the success they had in the game so far. Mike Meharry, the football gods, were so outraged by Tomlin's cowardice that this happened.
The kick is no good.
They pushed the try aside. All that work just to remain 24-3. They'd go on to lose by a whole bunch more. Speaking of losing, it's time for a little bit of
Adventures in Officiating.
Oh, it's been a bad few weeks for the NFL when it comes to officiating and quarterbacks in particular. Excellent strip sack by Daniel Jones of Kansas City, but there's some laundry on the field. What could it be? It looked like a great play to me. Derek Carr knows he got. Daniel Jones also came away with the football, the classic strip sack. What is it? They're calling personal foul, roughing the passer on Daniel Jones. What for? The referee says, "Oh, no, I made the right call, you guys." It's because, she's not happy. Whoa.
No.
He says it's because Daniel Jones fell with his weight on Derek Carr, which is one of those points of emphasis when it comes to the roughing the passer. The problem is that everything goes out the window if there's a live ball on the ground from a fumble. Does that look like a fumble to you, Mike Meharry?
It does look like a fumble to me.
Looks an awful lot like a fumble to me. Here's the slow motion. He goes through. If anything, he sort of kind of does that bit where he's going for the ball and tries to hold himself up. I don't know what you
he's got his
from
weight
this guy.
on one of his hands. I don't either.
The Waffle House special Andy Reid is not happy about it. This is not the first time Daniel Jones has been involved in a controversial roughing the passer penalty. I do want to say, by the way, that even if it hadn't been a fumble, what do you really expect from these 6'5", 350-pound guys to just stop on a dime and defy gravity? It's absolutely ridiculous.
It is. And speaking of ridiculous, that leads us right into the puck for the head this week. So before we had the egregious call in the Chiefs game, we've all seen it. The ridiculous roughing penalty referee Jerome Boger called on Grady Jarrett of the Atlanta Falcons. The only part of this that the ref got right was that Brady was, in fact, the passer. Roughing? No roughing. Nevertheless, the flag flew. Say that 3 times fast. And, that in and of itself was worth a puck to the head. But Boger's explanation made it even worse. This is what he said. This is his justification for this call. What I had was the defender grab the quarterback while he was still in the pocket and unnecessarily throwing him to the ground. Alan,
Yeah.
what do you do when you tackle somebody?
Well, not only do you throw him to the ground, but it's funny that you should bring that up. You can see in the replay right here, another one of those points of emphasis is they teach defenders to grab and roll. You want to roll down onto the ground with the quarterback. That looks like what Grady Jarrett did to me, Mike. I don't know.
I think it looked that way to the Falcons coach, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, so unnecessarily throwing him into the ground. That's what the defensive lineman is supposed to do in football. It's known as tackling.
Mm-hmm.
Tackling used to be a key element in football. Now, I know Boger is a symptom of a much bigger problem in football, but his face is on it, so he gets a buck to the head.
By the way, before we take the commercial break, I love that is the turn of phrase that all the referees use. When they call a penalty, it's what I have is. Mm-hmm. It's not what reality is. It's what it's never stop speaking your truth, Jerome Boger. All right, we're going to take a commercial break. We're going to be back to talk a little bit more about the issues with roughing the passer, injuries, and overreactions right after this commercial break. Don't go away. If you're enjoying this afternoon's episode of SportsBall, consider supporting the program by joining our Patreon over at patreon.com/Alan Mosley. Tune in to It's Too Late with Alan Mosley, Wednesday nights at 9 o'clock Eastern Time on your favorite video platform of choice. Just search Alan Mosley TV. I can see you looking at the screen every single time trying to figure out what all that shit is coming out of the schooner.
You know what? What I was just thinking is it's kind of almost a metaphor of NFL officiating.
Yes. On that note, we're going to expound on this for today's long form segment. So we shared this video last week of Tua Tagovailoa going down, hitting his head. He only got pushed over, but when you get that whiplash effect of your head hitting the turf, you're going to come up a little bit woozy, and he does right here. And we've added a clip as well into this from this week.
That was because of his back injury.
Yeah, that was a back injury. My mistake. That also happened in the Colts-Broncos game to the Colts backup runner, Naheem Wills. He was out of the game as well when the now new position of medical spotter saw that he was woozy when he got up. Now, you'll see in the clip, he was in fact woozy when he got up, and he shouldn't be playing football anymore, at least for the rest of that day. But the point being is that when these images come up on your screen, there is immediately a push, perhaps more by people who don't actually watch football than ones who do, but that's a different conversation for another day, to protect these quarterbacks in particular, protect the faces of the franchise.
Right.
Nobody wants to see this. Nobody wants to see a player on the ground having some kind of neurological episode. The problem is, Mike, is that the NFL doesn't exactly have the best track record of innovating the game, if you will, and they tend to overreact and then ultimately either roll back rules or move on into a direction that makes the game even worse or even perhaps less safe than it had been before. Yeah. So what are your thoughts on this so far?
Well, as we were talking about before the show, it reminds me a lot of the way government overreacts to certain things, particularly, specifically, I was thinking about the shoe bomber. You remember the shoe bomber? That was what? More than a decade ago. We're still taking our shoes off at the airport. This was like this weird kind of one-time thing. So anytime there's something like that happens, there's this immediate reaction to address that specific thing. And I really think we've seen that particularly with the legitimately frightening pictures of Tua, who's apparently practicing again. But anyway, yeah, I think there is definitely this. It's driven by the visual. It's driven by the immediacy of it. It's driven by the emotional reaction that people have, and less to really stepping back objectively and saying, okay, what are the issues that we're dealing with here, and how can we truly make it? Because we do want it to be we don't want to see the third string Miami Dolphin quarterback playing, right? I mean,
No.
it's bad football. So obviously, we do want to protect the quarterback, but we also have to reckon with the fact that this is a violent game. You can't make a violent game safe, right?
Yeah, correct. That's right. Um, it's really tough because it's one of those things where the cure ends up being worse than the disease type situation. I want to remind everybody, you might remind before times, before the pandemic, back in 2018, 2019, there was the issue of pass interference.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone was upset with pass interference because it's a huge penalty, right?
Right.
If a team can just ball down the field 50 yards and hope for a flag and get it, it completely changes the trajectory of a game.
Right. And that was a strategy for some offensive coordinators.
Looking at you, Joe Flacco and Baltimore Ravens.
Yes.
But with that said, so they tried to fix it. And what's their way of fixing it? The way of fixing it is instead of leaving it open to an individual ref's interpretation, we're going to write out in the rules all of these different points of emphasis and things to look for, which accompanies making pass interference reviewable.
Right.
What happened, Mike Maharrey? It was a disaster. Everybody hated it. All the reviews ended up going one way or another that no one expected or assumed were going to be the correct call or not. And they end up rolling back the rules because it just flat out didn't work.
Yeah.
What I fear, people are already predicting this is what's going to happen in this offseason. They're going to review roughing the passer because, as we've showed in the couple of clips today, it could be a big call. 15-yard personal foul for the Falcons Buccaneers game. That's game over because it's enormous change in the clock management, etc. For Chiefs Raiders, it was change of possession. So that's enormous. But if they decide to make something like roughing the passer reviewable, the only way you can review it is have things to review, which means you have to write out more pages in what is already a 187-page rule book to decide how you're going to review to decide what is objectively right or not.
It's like a bill in Congress.
I think it's going to wind up being the exact same thing as pass interference, which is what we need to have the referees making the judgment call without more bureaucracy. But what we need along with that is referees getting the call correct.
Right. Good referees, right?
Yeah.
Competent referees. And I think it's pretty clear, having watched football for most of my life, that there are, I guess as there are in most professions, some not so competent referees. And you and I just learned that the referee industry is unionized. So that means it makes it more difficult to weed out the referees who are less than ideal.
Yeah, that's right. So we discussed this as well, is that they've always had a certain sort of incentive structure to referees, primarily being that they are graded throughout the year. Referees that grade higher ultimately make more money. Boy, money's a great incentive structure.
It is.
And they make more money by being able to referee playoff games, by being able to referee perhaps even the Super Bowl. That's about as big of an honor as one can get for a referee, not to mention they get paid a lot more money for doing so. The problem is that it almost needs to be twofold. If you're going to incentivize good behavior, so be it. But you also have to be willing to pull the trigger on referee crews that are not doing a good job.
I agree completely. Yeah, you can't. Because money is a good incentive, but if you're a bottom tier ref, you're still going to get paid, and you know that job is secure. So you're incentivized to not be any better because I'm not going to lose my job. I might not get to be in the Super Bowl. Hell, I'm an NFL referee, right? So yeah, I think you're absolutely right. That bottom end needs to be incentivized to the point where we actually get rid of the worst of the worst. And maybe that would incentivize some of the folks in the bottom tier to be better.
On a related note, in the game this past Monday, Joe Buck and Troy Aikman were calling the game, and Troy Aikman made the comment that they really need to evaluate these rules in the offseason. Followed by, and maybe we can take the dresses off these quarterbacks. He got in trouble with all the usual... He said no words. Yeah, he said no words. That was sexist and misogynistic because, of course, the men he was talking about just couldn't handle being talked to now, being identified in a feminine sense. But beyond the ridiculous controversy that becomes infinitely more political than sports ought to be, I understood what he was saying when he said it. And I remember, Troy Aikman was the quarterback I was watching as a kid growing up, playing for all those great Dallas teams. That was still during an era where the quarterbacks got killed.
Yeah.
They were getting their knockers rocked constantly. I remember that very famous play when they were playing the Washington Potomac Drainage Bases indigenous persons, when a player just decked him on the sideline when he was on the sideline. The Cowboys were on defense just because it was just, I mean, that is a dirty play, but it was a dirtier league back then.
Sure. It was.
I think it's ridiculous to suggest that the game hasn't already been cleaned up a lot. But I think as the point that you've made, it's you can't make this safe. You can make it safer, but you can't make it safe.
Right.
These are prime athletes, huge guys running. I mean, you and I have both marveled constantly at how Derrick Henry is both way bigger and way stronger than us. And oh, by the way, he also runs a 440.
Way faster.
Yeah.
So let's have a moment of honesty here.
Okay.
As again, somebody who's watched football since I was a little kid.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that appeals to me about the game is the violence in the game.
Yes.
I love a good hit.
Mm-hmm.
I love the physicality of the game. I love the whole, I'm in danger of being sexist, but the whole man-on-man, that could be a clip on announcer
yeah,
section.
shit, Mike Maharrey says.
Yes. But I like that. It's also why I like hockey. If I want to watch a game that is devoid of physicality, I'll watch a baseball game.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think, I'm guessing I'm not alone. I know I'm not alone because I've sat in an arena with 20,000 other people who are dead quiet in a hockey game until the fight starts. And then everybody's on their feet. There's a certain part of us that appeals to watching that physicality, that violence, if you will. That's part of the game. When you start taking that, you're ruining the fundamental core of what the game is. And in my opinion, if you're going to do that, just get rid of the game.
Well, speaking of that, I'll end on that. I always make the argument in cases like this that you should dance with the one who brought you. That's right. It's football fans, the people who are buying the jerseys, going to the games, buying the tickets, subscribing to NFL Network and Sunday Ticket, the people who are paying the coffers that have grown the NFL to, yes, but all franchises combined, $150 billion industry that National Football League is. It got there off the backs of those players playing by those rules and those fans enjoying that sport.
Yeah.
When you cow to a demographic of people that think football's too manly, too violent, too dangerous, those people don't even watch football.
Exactly.
Who are this same thing can be applied to so many things. But with that said, Mike, it's time for us to put our solemn faces on. Yeah, thank you, sir. It's time for In Memoriam. We remember a player, a team, a coach, whoever, whose sporting life was cut tragically short. Mike, who are you remembering this week?
Well, I have to remember Matt Rule. He's the latest college football coach not to make it in the NFL. The Panthers fired him after the 35-17 loss to the 49ers. That dropped Carolina to 1-4 on the season. Rule, who became a trendy NFL hire after turning around the Baylor program, is now employed. Owner David Tepper said he made the decision because Rule couldn't get the Panthers, quote, over the hump. Quote, it's winning, Tepper said. Winning more than this year than you did last year. Looking like you're going to win more than you did last year. By that definition, I don't think we're over the hump. Tepper isn't wrong. Rule was 11-27 as the head man in Carolina. Then again, just 6 months ago, Tepper said it could take 5 or 6 years to build an organization capable of sustained excellence. So I guess Rule wasn't in that equation. But Alan, don't feel too bad for Rule. He's going to make $834,000 a month for the next 2 years, not coaching the Carolina Panthers.
A $40 million contract buyout, Mike Maharrey. I am waiting for someone in the audience to pay us $40 million to quit this awful show. Mike, I'm remembering, Aaron, look away, buddy. I'm remembering the Oklahoma Sooners, but specifically the honeymoon phase for new head coach Brent Venables, the hot defensive coordinator out of Clemson, who said no to a lot of people before he finally said yes to Oklahoma. How's this for the Sooners, who are on a 3-game losing streak? They've given up 145 points in those 3 straight losses, including this past weekend's 49-0 beatdown at the hands of rival Texas in the Red River Shootout. He's getting paid $7 million a year for 6 years to have the worst losses in school history. That's a bonus. I can do that.
Right? But, the Clemson assistant coaches aren't looking too good right now.
No.
Scott over at USF.
Yeah.
He's getting toasty.
I don't know. We've seen this phenomenon with Saban, by the way. Of course, Saban's not quite looking as hot as he's necessarily have over the course of his tenure, but he went a lot of years smacking around his assistants that went to other teams before he finally got by Kirby Smart. So maybe there's something to that. All right, Mike, we're moving on to the picks. Let's run through these really quick. All right.
Let's do it.
We're going to start with this. College football, number 10, Penn State Nittany Lions. Number 10, undefeated, but they're 7-point underdogs because they're playing at number 5, Michigan Wolverines. Who do you have?
Yeah, I like Michigan in this game. I think Penn State's got a good running game, but I think Michigan's just a little better. So I'm going to go with Michigan.
I feel like this is the classic game where both teams are almost identical, but Michigan's a little bit better in every phase of the game. Plus, they're playing at home. Plus, their running back is like a legit Heisman Trophy candidate. So I'm going to go Michigan as well. Oh, my God, Mike Maharrey.
Mm-hmm.
The number 3 Alabama Crimson Tide are only 7-point underdogs to a team that this time a year and a half ago was 3-7, NCAA infractions and no head coach. It's the Tennessee Volunteers, who are number 6 and undefeated, fresh off of their shellacking of LSU in Baton Rouge. What do you think?
Well, I'm going to jinx your Vols and actually say that Tennessee's going to upset the Crimson Tide.
No, Mike, don't do that.
I'm doing it. I'm doing it. I don't know. I mean, just looking at the trends, Tennessee looks good. That quarterback is legit.
Mm-hmm.
They're playing in Tennessee. You're going to have a ramped up Vols fan base. Alabama's not looked good in more than one game. They've not looked good. I think this is, if there is a time for Tennessee to upset Alabama, it's now.
So it looks like Bryce Young probably will play, but I don't know what kind of Bryce Young we're going to see. I'll give you this. I'm picking Alabama because it's too many years with battered Vol syndrome to pick Tennessee in this game. I still think Tennessee's a couple of years more under Heupel away from really being rebuilt. I think it's ridiculous to say you can magically rebuild a team in a year and a half. With that said, if the Alabama team from last week shows up to play the UT team from last week, Tennessee rolls.
Yeah.
All right, we're moving on. Mississippi State Bulldogs are number 16. They're 4-point favorites, traveling to number 22, Kentucky Wildcats. Mike, I know Kentucky's lost a couple of games, but there's been quarterback injuries of their own. And Levis might be a top 3 quarterback in the country when all is said and done and the NFL draft gets here for him. Is he going to be back, and can Kentucky get back on track?
Well, at this point, Levis has been practicing. Coach Stoops says that he is going to play, assuming no setbacks.
Okay.
And I think that playing at home, coming off of those tough games, I think the Cats are going to be ramped up. I'm going to take them to take the Mississippi State Bulldogs in an upset win in Lexington, KY.
I'm going the same thing. I think Kentucky bounces back as well. We're moving on to the NFL. Talk about a treat for this week. I mean, AFC title game type of feel. Buffalo Bills, 4-1. They are 2.5-point favorites on the road at the Kansas City Chiefs. Kansas City is the underdog in this game playing at home, so Vegas really thinks the Bills are the best team in the NFL. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the Bills are the best team in the NFL too.
Mm-hmm.
But as we've seen with the NFL, any given Sunday, man, you get some weird crap going on. I think I'm going to take the Bills, though. I think Bills are just a little bit better than the Chiefs.
Yeah, I kind of think the Bills are better too. So the Chiefs, I mean, in last week's game against the Raiders, for about 30 minutes, they looked like a team that would blow out the Bills. And then for the last 30 minutes, they were saying we need the calls to go our way because we're about to lose to the Las Vegas Raiders.
Right.
So if they can't play a full game at home against the Raiders, they're going to have a hard time against Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs and the Buffalo Bills. I'm going to go Bills as well. There's no drama here because we're picking all the same teams.
I know.
All right, Mike Maharrey, I've got you a couple of hockey games.
Woo.
So now is your time to shine. How about this? The Dallas Stars, who apparently haven't actually played a game yet, versus the Nashville Predators, who have played, and they're 2-0. What do you think?
Yeah, well, Nashville's played in Europe, so you wonder if there's going to be some fatigue factor with the Preds. This is a tough game to call. I'm talking about that parity. These are two teams that are kind of in that middle tier of Western Conference teams that could sneak into the picture when you get into playoff time. I think I'm going to go Preds just because they're going to possibly be a little crisper, having a few games under their belts. And I think they have maybe a little stronger roster than the Stars. So we'll go with the home team.
All right, Preds by 50. And finally, the Tampa Bay Lightning are on the road against the Columbus Blue Jackets. What do you think?
Well, my bias says the Lightning are going to get smoked because they look pretty bad against the Rangers. But they're a lot better team than the Blue Jackets. They should win that game. So we're going to go with the Lightning taking the Jackets.
All right. Well, I'm going to pick the Lightning as well because you'll tell me midway through the first period that it's over and then they'll win by 3.
Right.
All right.
I'll tell you not only that it's over, but there's no possible way in the world that they can ever get into the playoffs.
Correct. Mike, do you have a final thought?
I do have a final thought. This is completely irrelevant. Nobody's going to care, but I just found out that I'm the same age as Troy Aikman.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. In other words, he's old.
I'm willing to bet he can thread a ball a little bit better than you, but I'm pretty sure his brain's more jelly than yours is.
Right. I'll put him on the rink.
Yeah.
Put him on ice skates. It's a whole different world.
Guys, thank you so much for watching another episode of SportsBall. I think we're going to be live tonight for Thursday Night Football. Last week I had said during the Thursday Night Football Colts-Broncos game, we can only go up from here. That game was so awful. And what do we get this week? Bears-Commanders. All right, guys, thank you so much, and we will see you next week.
You have been listening to SportsBall with Mike Maharrey and Alan Mosley. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Odyssey, all at Alan Mosley TV. You can also subscribe to the show on your favorite podcasting platforms. Just search for SportsBall with Mike and Alan. And you can find the weekly Sunken Cost Money Pit at Substack. Thanks for listening. We'll have more bread and circuses next week.